Ah, what a great new day. Time to check my YouTube stats and see how many likes my latest video.
NANI?! お前はもう死んでいる。
Since my last video on the possibility of a hypothetical extended Nintendo cinematic universe seems to have stirred up a bit of a mild hornet's nest, relative, of course, to the microscopic size of my channel, I figured I would go ahead and comment on it because, well, first off, before I get into that, I finally saw the Mario Bros. Movie. It's kind of funny now how it's like, if you get to a movie, what, like 2-3 weeks after it comes out these days, you feel like you, quote-unquote, finally got to it. Isn't that weird? Everyone seems to, we move in this constantly churning pop culture environment now. Everything just cycles on and on and on so fast. I watch a movie like, what, 2.5 weeks later, and it feels like I'm like showing up at a New Year's Eve party at like 2 a.m. Like, hey guys, oh wait, everyone's gone already. It's over. But yeah, I'm not always 100% up to date on every pop culture event. But anyway, so I did finally get to this one. And but anyway, let's just get right into talking about the movie itself. And I won't go into detail about everything, just so as not to repeat the other, there's 10,000 other people on YouTube who've done their Mario movie reviews by this point, and I've watched several of them myself, including a couple, kind of in-depth, like long podcasts about it. So I don't want to repeat everyone else, but I'll say, so the plot is obviously extremely simple, but deliberately so, I would say, because if you think about it, this movie doesn't just function as kind of a standalone work, but kind of as a quote-unquote pilot episode.
Pilot? What's a pilot?
For like at least a kind of extended Mario cinematic universe, if not a Nintendo universe in general, which we'll get to talking about that later. But even if the Nintendo universes don't cross over, this is a pilot for the Nintendo cinematic concept, so to speak. So in light of viewing it that way, I think that simplicity was the right thing and the way to go, because you want to start building in the kind of twists and upending people's expectations and getting into deeper lore and stuff like that. That kind of stuff you want to save for a little bit later on in future projects. So I think that for this first movie, just straight up going Mushroom Kingdom versus Bowser's Army was the good way to go, was the right choice. And which I think, the box office results reflect. It's simple, it's for all ages, but it's very accessible for the kids because there's not a ton of dynamics to understand. In fact, if anything, I'd say they added extra wrinkles beyond, the truly most minimalistic possible Mario movie by also adding in, for example, the Kong Kingdom, or what was it called, the Jungle Kingdom, and Mario Kart elements and stuff like that. So there's a few different dynamics there going on. We kind of have two rival kingdoms to some extent, with the Mushroom Kingdom and the Jungle Kingdom versus Bowser's Kingdom, the Dark Lands, is that what they called it in the movie? So, it's not the simplest possible, but it's a streamlined plot, we'll say that. And speaking of that Kong Kingdom visit, Jungle Kingdom, it was brief, didn't occupy most of the movie's runtime, but for that, it was reasonably well fleshed out. Like, they put a lot of work, it seemed, into building the quote-unquote digital set of that whole, jungle. It almost reminded me a little bit, funnily enough, of the Avatar Way of Water, that water community, like all those docks and little islands and harbor type of look of it. Kong Kingdom almost reminded me of that a little bit when you got kind of the wide shot of it when they were first coming in. But yeah, they fleshed that out pretty well, and we got to meet quite a few Kongs, actually. Yeah, I will say that unfortunately Seth Rogen does in fact do the Seth Rogen laugh as Donkey Kong, which was yeah, it was kind of, that was one thing I was hoping wasn't in the movie, but it was, because yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of grates against my skull a little bit. I think that was, he also do it in the Chip and Dale movie that came out last year. It's kind of like a little bit of a cringe there. So yeah, I was hoping for that and didn't get it. I was also hoping for no fart jokes, however, and I believe there wasn't any, unless I'm forgetting something or missed something. I think it would have stand out in my brain if there was. No, I don't think there was any fart jokes, which that is a win. Although I will acknowledge, having said that once Wario comes in a future sequel, yeah, he probably will have to fart. It's it's an iconic part of his character, so I'll let it slide just in that case. But yeah, we don't need Mario or Luigi farting. It would be, or Bowser even. It would be ideal if that didn't happen. So besides that little complaint about the Donkey Kong voice, and also maybe Fred Armisen as Cranky Kong, which I don't know. It was It felt a little bit more like he was playing it as like the Kong King a little bit, the king of the Kongs, not a King Kong, the kaiju, but the king of the Kong Kingdom. Almost a little bit more of a regal edge to it than like a real cranky, like get off my lawn, like a little bit more of a reedier kind of pitch is how I'd always pictured Cranky Kong from his dialogue in the the various games. But other than that, I'd say the voices all did fine. I don't know if there was anything that stood out to me as like a exceptional vocal performance. There are exceptional vocal performances in the history of animated films. I think of always Peter O'Toole in Ratatouille as a really remarkable performance. Robin Williams as the Genie, of course. Nothing here really stood out to me quite in that way, but it was all perfectly good enough. The Chris Pratt backlash, it went on for months and seemed kind of like weirdly aggressive at points to me. Not that Chris Pratt is my favorite actor or anything like that, but it did seem a little, something about it felt kind of off to me. Like, I don't want to get spicy. I don't like to do that on this channel at all, but the most of the backlash for like the last half year or whatever against that felt more political to me than anything else. Not as in like, Hollywood politics, but like IRL politics, Twitter politics, cringe politics. But that does seem to have dropped off now that the movie came out. And like I said, was it a great vocal performance by Pratt that we'll be speaking of for decades to come? I doubt it really. Put on like a little Brooklyn edge.
I'm in the mood for some real Brooklyn pizza.
In a few lines, but mostly it was just got the job done. But yeah, overall, I think that the backlash that seemed to be at the top of every comment section about the movie and in everyone's previews of reacting to trailers and stuff seems a little stupid to me in retrospect. Just kind of shows a lack of imagination, I feel like, almost outside of like a very limited kind of video game focused bubble that everyone actually wanted the Mario 64 voice through the entire movie, like Charles Martinet spending an hour and a half going woo woohoo yippee mamma mia. Like that would have been extremely grating and awful, and this is one of those cases where I'm thankful that the creatives didn't take the advice of the fans, because it would have made the movie pretty difficult to watch. But anyway, as I said before, not to just kind of repeat other YouTubers, because I think every review I listen to like 4 or 5 reviews here on YouTube, and I think every single one of them mentioned this, so I'm just gonna be repeating what others have said. But I think the licensed music in the film was maybe calling it cringe would be going a little bit too far, but I'll say jarring and a bit unnecessary in my opinion. The one song that I thought really worked was in the opening scene. They're kind of doing the side-scrolling section in Brooklyn, or in New York, when they're going through the construction site to get their plumbing job, and they play a No Sleep Till Brooklyn. That I thought worked pretty well. It worked in the context of the scene, thematically, just the rhythm of it worked with the scene. That was pretty good. I enjoyed that. Everything after that, like the Take On Me and Holding Out for a Hero, that one was a little that was like, that's pretty cliche. Like, I just associate that in terms of animated films entirely with like Shrek. So yeah, I would have just preferred more Mario music. But all that said, outside of those few scenes where they did that kind of thing, they really did load this movie up with Koji Kondo music, kind of orchestrated versions of, and I wouldn't have even predicted it going in. I would imagine, we'll hear the original da 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 da, and maybe like the underground theme, maybe Bowser's airship theme, which we did hear right at the beginning of the movie, I believe. But no, they really loaded this thing up with sound effects too, from a lot from the original game, not even like a redone, kind of like some sound effects sample drive from it for like pipes and power-ups and stuff, it sounded like. But yeah, we got stuff from the original game, stuff from Mario 3, the athletic theme, the I heard some Gusty Gardens Galaxy, some Mario Kart 8. I mean, there are some deeper cuts they could even go into in like future movies, but yeah, there was so many good uses of the Koji Kondo music in orchestrated form here, and I was very impressed with that. Because it's kind of like a major sticking point for me with a lot of video game adaptations. Video game music is great. Video game music is iconic. I've loved video game music my whole life. So why do most adaptations of video games seem to really just sprint the other way from it? I don't understand. Like the Castlevania Netflix series, I do enjoy it. I'm a fan of it, and like to maybe do definitely when that Castlevania Nocturne comes out later in the year, do a review of that on my channel for sure. But As far as I recall, in the 30 some odd episodes of that show that they made, I believe there's exactly one scene where they use a song from the Castlevania games in the season 2, either the finale or the next to last episode, when they're kind of invading the castle. They play like some, was it Wicked Child or Bloody Tears or something like that? I can't remember which one exactly off the top of my head. I haven't seen it in a few years, but as I recall, that's the only scene in the entire series they ever play a song from the Castlevania games, which is crazy because games are full of amazing music, just all of them. The main side scrollers, the Metroidvanias, they could have just used dozens of tracks and kind of reorchestrated versions of them, and they would have complemented so many scenes so well. The Sonic movies that came out are also guilty. I think we got like a tiny little taste of Green Hill Zone, but why no Angel Island? Why no Chemical Plant Zone or whatever? Why no, I could go on and on. Final Fantasy movies. Yeah, it's just, I think that one thing, if this is the beginning of a greater Nintendo film franchise, which given the box office numbers, I'm positive it will be, but we'll talk about that later. I think one thing they really get right off the bat that bodes well for the future is this, using the music, because yes, a Zelda movie should use music from across the Zelda series. Metroid music, we should be hearing some Brinstar depths, Kirby, we gotta hear dun 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 dun, dun, and so on and so forth. So thumbs up on all the Koji Kondo music in this film. But let's spin around and look back at the plot. So I called it simple but functional. I admit that I personally never cared much for the Alice in Wonderland style Portal fantasy version of the Mario mythos. This goes back to even when I was a kid. What was I, 6 or 7 years old when I saw the live action Mario movie in the 90s? And even then I was even as a small kid, I was kind of like, I could have lived with them just being from the Mario universe, right? And that was when there was only like 4 or 5 Mario games when that movie came out. Now there's 400 or 500 Mario games. And I liked, I remember liking even back in 1995 when Yoshi's Island seemed to kind of canonize this retcon that they were babies in the Mushroom Kingdom. So this movie kind of flipped it back to the Brooklyn, magic pipe teleporting into the Mushroom Kingdom version of things. So I'm kind of like, if that's the way Nintendo wants it, I'm not gonna sit here and cry and wave my fists about it. It is what it is. It was never how I envisioned Mario, throughout these last couple decades when I've been playing Mario games. But if that's how they want to do it, it is what it is. But speaking of Yoshi's Island, though, we had a little cameo in the flashback from Baby Mario and Baby Luigi rocking their kind of perfect representations, their video game forms. And that was clever. That was one of the many references in the movie that I enjoyed, all the way from, the balloon fight man on one of the billboards in Brooklyn, right, to some Punch-Out memorabilia, to my personal favorite, seeing him play the actual NES Kid Icarus, one of my favorite NES games of all time. That was I would not have guessed that. I would not have guessed that we'd get, this going to be $1 billion grossing major theatrical release that millions and millions and millions of people are watching. As I'm sitting here recording this, would have several solid seconds of actual footage of NES Kid Icarus with the actual battle music from that game and the game over music, and I'm finished. I would never have guessed that. I would thought that would be kind of having Kid Icarus on the big screen anyway would be something Nintendo would get to, 20 movies into this. The fact that it's in this first movie in this kind of Nintendo cinematic project is I enjoy that very much, because I've always been a huge fan of Kid Icarus, by which I do just mean the Kid Icarus the game, not the series, because I never owned a 3DS, so I've never actually played Kid Icarus Uprising, so I'm just talking about Kid Icarus, the NES game that I love. So that was cool to see. But I'm not here to give an unequivocal stroke job to this movie, because I will criticize a few things that some of which I've heard other people say, some of which is just kind of my little peccadillos, my little quirks of things I don't quite like in fiction so much. For me, I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe this isn't even a valid complaint, but I never like when villains in movies are treated as jokes. Like when the villain is the source of the comedy, and now a villain can have funny moments that surround him. Even, Darth Vader has a couple of very droll moments, apology accepted. Some of the Jafar might have a few moments he gets embarrassed. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I do like the villain to be kind of more of a legitimate threat And that's why I like Hades from Hercules, the Disney one, has never been too much of a favorite villain of mine because he's just too comedic for me. And it kind of undermines it a little bit. Obviously, this wouldn't include actual comedy movie villains like, Austin Powers, Dr. Evil, but when it's kind of like there's a legitimate conflict, but the villain on the other side is strictly a comedy figure, it's not my favorite. It kind of undermines the tension a little bit for me. All that said, I do get it with Bowser because Bowser has been a comedic foil in all across mediums, in cartoons, in comic books, even in video games, like Bowser, crying in Mario RPG and, sitting in his hot tub in Super Mario Sunshine. So the idea of a comedic Bowser, this might be one of the villains where I would let it slide a little bit, where I understand where the doing it that way comes from. That said, I would hope that even a sequel to this movie, like a hypothetical Mario movie 2, would get a little bit more serious with the threat, kind of put our heroes in a little bit more what seems like serious danger, and never even mind future movies like Zelda or Metroid. Like, I wouldn't want a comedic, I wouldn't want, Ganondorf getting singing songs on a piano about how much he loves Zelda, or getting walked in on, getting embarrassed practicing his wedding vows, that kind of thing. But that said, I understand where it's coming from for Bowser, because it's not a new idea for Bowser to be a semi-embarrassed comedic foil. They've done it before. The depiction of Princess Peach felt a little, some people have said she's a little bit of a yassified girl boss. Inherently, I don't have a problem with that, because that's not really one, I do get they couldn't really have basically the one female character with more than 2 lines of dialogue in the entire movie just be captured and be a damsel in distress. That would be a little iffy maybe. And beyond that, the idea of quote unquote girl boss Peach, not a new concept. I think of if any of you have read the Super Mario Bros. Comic that was in the Nintendo Power, I think it was in the early 90s. Was it maybe 92 or 93? It was in there. You should check that out if you haven't. It's an interesting, different Mario story that kind of grabs a lot of elements from Mario World, but then invents a lot of different stuff too, has a lot of fun cliffhangers. And that one also had a very much like an action girl Peach. There's kind of, she's even like infiltrating Bowser's castle and stuff in that. But what I think maybe this movie does a little too much of is making her actually too competent, like super competent. Like we have the bit where she's like, I did the obstacle course my first try, I can use all the power-ups at least as good as, maybe better than Mario. It's kind of like this thing where if you give female characters, you make them so hyper competent and hyper skilled that they have no struggles, no arc, no room for growth, no hero's journey, no insecurities or weaknesses. It's actually, it kind of loops around. It's like a horseshoe, and it ironically becomes actually not great for female characters. But all the same, I did like her as kind of the monarch of the Toads. One thing that was missing was Toadsworth, right? I would have liked to seen him. That would have been a fun, different voice to kind of at least give Peach someone to talk to. Because even in this one, it's interesting. I thought that so they showed it so that Toad, like the Toad, like this presumably the Toad we play as in Mario Bros. 2 and Mario Kart games, met Mario first. Because I always thought of Toad as kind of like a Peach's sidekick. She pulls him out in Smash Bros. And whatnot. But in this one, it seemed like they had them actually meeting for the first time and not knowing each other. So that was kind of interesting. So in that way, if you have almost Toad as Mario's sidekick instead of Peach's like you usually have him, you'd almost want like a Toadsworth as Peach's sidekick, at least to give her someone to talk to in the castle. So maybe there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there, but in this one, she seems to be pretty much the sole monarch over the Toadstools. And there's also a pretty interesting bit where they set up something about, and I believe this is a brand new bit of lore that's never been part of any Mario media before, the idea that she has a mysterious origin, doesn't know her parents or where she came from, came out of a pipe at some point in her infancy, so we also had a Baby Peach cameo, and so that's obviously a little bit of a sequel set up there, and I'll discuss that more later, but yeah, so that's interesting. It's one of the few, that and basically meeting Mario's parents, I believe, right, and this new Peach origin story. I think those are basically our two kind of fresh bits of lore in this film. So that's kind of interesting. I just wish they'd maybe like not gone quite so far with like I did the obstacle course on my first try and I'm way better at any of this than you, because it kind of makes it seem like, well, that's great for you, Peach, but then I don't understand why you need to bring Mario. It almost makes Mario you almost picture Mario and Peach's relationship in previous media as kind of being like a knight. You know, he's like the knight to her princess. And this one, it's almost more like he's her sidekick. So I don't even know why she brought him with her. Maybe I wish they'd done like a line where they said something like maybe the Toads couldn't use the power-ups or something like that. So that would explain why she needs someone who can with her. It's like almost like he's more thrust into a position that he's not ready for because he has like an inborn ability that the Toads don't or something like that. Because it did seem a little bit strange that the monarch, the princess of this kingdom, is going on this adventure by foot, not even using a vehicle or riding anything across the lands, basically by herself. Or at least she does have two people come with her, but it seems like if Mario and Toad hadn't shown up at the castle that way, she would have done it all by herself. So that's a little weird. I think she needs to get her military a little more in line so she has some kind of bodyguards at least. And speaking of the power-ups, this might be my biggest issue with the movie, and not the having the power-ups itself. On the contrary, I really like the depiction of the fire flowers, how you actually grab the fire from it, and it like the element of fire moves from the flower. Just like your hand. I thought that was pretty neat. And I liked seeing everything. I really liked the accurate question mark blocks. I have no problem with the power-ups as presented. I think they all looked great. I did have a problem with the fact that it seemed like they were repeatedly giving Mario kind of an easy way out, kind of a Deus Ex Machina, not just once, but multiple times over through the whole movie. Like basically outside of maybe the Mario Kart sequence where it seemed like Mario was doing pretty well, Mario has basically like 3 major achievements in this movie, right? Beating Donkey Kong in the arena, saving the Mushroom Kingdom from the Bonsai Bill, it's going to destroy the castle, and fighting Bowser at the end and beating him with Luigi's help. And one thing you notice is that all 3 of those things end up revolving around power-up that he gets at the last second. Beating Donkey Kong, he got the cat power-up. Flying to save the Mushroom Kingdom from the Bonsai Bill, he had the Tanuki suit, the raccoon suit, I don't know what the proper terminology for it is now. I always call it the Tanuki suit because that's how I was trained to by my Mario Bros. 3 days. And then to beat Bowser, of course, at the end, they got the invincibility star. And I don't know, it seemed like a little bit too much of that, maybe. Like, basically every time it was like if he hadn't have had those power-ups, he would have failed. So I'd like to see maybe in like a hypothetical sequel, like more sequences where he has to kind of go in things, at least just with the mushroom, if not completely like small Mario. And do things kind of like the superhero sequel thing where we see like, Superman 2, Superman loses his powers, Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one, Spider-Man loses his powers for a while. Even like Iron Man 3, Iron Man loses his suit for a while, right? I'd like to see that kind of thing where we have to see Mario getting by nothing but his kind of intuition and natural athleticism, like a possible sequel for maybe like some tough sequences. And there was bits of that at the end, of course, where Bowser was fighting them in the streets of Brooklyn, right? And Luigi got in there with, what was it, a sewer grate or something like that? A sewer lid to block the fire. And Mario, of course, charged in without a power-up. And you like seeing that bravery, right? But I'd like to see a little bit more of him fighting enemies without power-ups in the sequel, just so we don't feel like we're leaning on that a little too much as a crutch, because it felt like to some extent it undermined some of his character development by making things a little too easy for him at points, especially when he got the cat power-up, because it really did kind of seem like if I was Donkey Kong in that situation, I'd be calling like, hey, this was cheap. I was easily winning this battle until he got the power-up at the last second to let him win everything. But where the film may have lagged a little bit in plot and kind of character development, I think that it more than made up for and justified its own existence in terms of world building, so to speak, lore, visuals, iconography, specifically in the fact that it basically just translated those things more or less straight from game to screen, minus maybe the canonizing the idea of them being from Brooklyn. That's something that's not straight from the recent games, but other than that, it's like I just talked about with the music. Most video game adaptations seem to shy away from like using the game music itself, other than maybe like a tiny little an Easter egg, a nugget of the original music, almost as like a hint toward the like a game fans. But it seems like video game movies all feel like they have to adapt things for an imaginary kind of a mainstream audience, right? But here's like the key news flash right now, especially in the light of the last decade or so, where the box office is dominated by superheroes and space opera. The mainstream audience is like the geek audience now, right? They've merged. They're one and the same. And as such, I find it annoying when video game adaptations, which I mean, take your pick of any of them for this. The previous Mario movie, of course, the Street Fighter movies we've gotten, the live action ones, the Doom movie, Uncharted just last year, the Tomb Raider movies, the Resident Evil ones, that whole set with Mila Jovovich, the Paul W.S. Anderson series, the Final Fantasy, the Spirits Within. Heck, I would even call out, I know this movie has some hardcore fans out there, I would even call it the Sonic movies, which, yes, they did give us a little bit of Green Hill Zone at the beginning, gave us a few Sonic accurate characters, but it wasn't like it felt the need to move him to the real world, like give us how the CIA would react to Sonic's presence, have a whole load of human characters and their dynamics. It didn't just give us the Sonic world, right? Same with Detective Pikachu. Felt it kind of had to shift the Pokemon mythos into kind of like this noir detective thing. Yeah, it feels like all these video game movies feel like they need to kind of adapt things for like a mainstream audience that the studio imagines they're trying to appeal to. Maybe an exception would be I didn't see it, but the Ratchet and Clank movie that came out some years ago looked pretty accurate to the games from what I saw from the trailer, but maybe that's the exception. But yeah, they always feel like they have to kind of reimagine these game worlds. But so now we have this movie, and it's just like, not to hell with all that. We're not reimagining anything. Here's the Mushroom Kingdom. Here's Peach's Castle. Here's the Kingdom of Toadstool people. Here's our power blocks. Fire Flowers, Goombas, Koopas, Donkey Kong and the Kong Kingdom, Bowser, Mario Kart, Rainbow Road, Bullet Bill, the Giant Eel, Yoshi's at the Yoshi's on kind of a herd of them, and then one at the end. And what do you know? Box office gold. So I think that proves a very important lesson, which is that you don't really need to change things that, I mean, you need to give voiceless characters or kind of generally non-speaking characters like Mario. You need to give them things to say, obviously. Same for hypothetical Zelda movie. No, Link would not be a silent protagonist. I've actually heard a couple of people online propose that a Zelda movie should have Link not talking the whole movie. And I'm like, no, that's terrible. Don't give ideas if those are your ideas. They're bad. But so obviously you'll need to come up with things for characters to say in like a movie adaptation of a video game, because that's how it works, and give them character arcs, which Mario and Luigi of course had, going from kind of bullied and failing at kind of their missions in life at the beginning of the movie to being heroes at the end. You'll need those things, but other than that, you need to invent dialogue and maybe a character arc. But the world itself, the key lore, visuals, iconography, here's what you gotta do for a video game movie. Reach your hand into the goddamn video game, take the goddamn video game, pull it out, and put it on the movie screen. That's it. You're good. That's all you need to do. You don't need to make a realistic reimagining of things. You don't need to tone people's outfits and down. You don't need to invent new monsters or whatever. Just take the game, put it on the screen. Take the game, put it on the screen. Take the game, put it on the screen. And the success of this movie proves that. That's what people want to see. And I think that they did a really good job kind of doing a grab bag of elements from across most of the Mario series, at least the main line. The RPGs seem to have been completely ignored here, and I unfortunately would have to guess they probably always will be. But anyway, yeah, we got everything from references to the classic era of the NES days, and I guess pre-NES actually with the Donkey Kong. We got a little bit of the do 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 do, a little bit of that. We got NES references, with the princess in another castle. We got a little gag at that. Similarly, in a Zelda movie, I have to admit, I would love it if someone dropped a nice, it's dangerous to go alone, take this. I think I would like a little bit of that snuck into the Zelda movie, right? But we got that, sound effects from the NES days, all the way through more modern stuff, like the Bowser wearing his Mario Odyssey wedding outfit. And one thing I thought was kind of a really interesting way to reimagine it was they took some of the slightly more obscure monsters, not your Goombas and Koopas. They took some of the slightly more obscure ones whose names I have to admit I don't even know off the top of my head, from the Mario 3D games, especially Mario 3D World, and had them be the natural fauna of the Mushroom Kingdom that Mario encounters when he comes through the pipe. And I thought that was pretty cool, a neat way to do that. And then in contrast, the Goombas and Koopas are actually the servants of the Bowser's army. So that was a neat way to incorporate some slightly newer and more obscure monsters. Some games felt a little bit less referenced. There wasn't a ton that was felt specifically kind of referencing Super Mario World, but maybe the sequel could do that with Yoshi. Maybe we could visit Yoshi's Island more properly. And one thing I thought they missed is, when they were walking through the castle, or first infiltrating Peach's castle, I was keeping my eyes on the walls, because I was like, they're going to stick some Super Mario 64 paintings on the walls, right? And I didn't, unless I missed something in the back of a shot, I didn't see anything. So that's one little change I would have made. I would have put a few of those, those paintings that you jump in Mario 64. I would have snuck a few of those on the wall in Peach's castle. But of course, there's tons of Mario Kart references. Other reviewers have mentioned the selecting your kart wheels and frame and glider with the accurate sound effects, stuff like that. But there's still tons of references on the table for future movies, which anyway, that's enough of talking about this movie. Let's slide on into future movies. So before we address the possible and I would say likely future of the extended Nintendo cinematic franchise, which that'll kind of dovetail into also discussing the reaction here on YouTube to my latest video. First, let's discuss specifically the future of the Mario sequels and what I think is likely a kind of a branching out Mario universe. So I think it's probably very safe to say, with this movie on its way to a cool $1 billion at the box office, that yeah, we're definitely looking at sequels here. Sequels for years, no doubt. But what I want to wonder about is what form could those sequels take? So here's the thing. This movie is in an interesting and rare position where it could not only have a sequel, but branch off quite easily into kind of a little small network of sequels. Like I said earlier, there's quite a bit of a Donkey Kong setup here. That's here's one bit where I have to retract something. I had to formally retract my last poorly received video. I have to retract the part where I said that in future films they could bring in Diddy Kong, because it turns out Diddy Kong is in this movie. I had no idea. I'd never heard. Didn't think we were going to see Diddy Kong at all, but yep, he was right there. Tiny little cameo. I don't think he even had did he have a line? I can't remember, but you always saw him and Dixie Kong, and I thought for a second it was Kiddy Kong, like redone. Then I remembered, no, it's the one from Donkey Kong 64, Chunky Kong, right? I couldn't think of his name while I was watching the movie, because if I'm being honest with you, I haven't played Donkey Kong 64 in like 23 years. I didn't like it that much. It was too big and too complicated. I prefer Banjo-Kazooie. Yeah, I think that was Chunky Kong, right? But yeah, that was great. That was a perfect setup. I mean, Cranky Kong, the land itself. Well, now, we didn't get any of the enemies from Donkey Kong Country, but it would be so easy to do a spin-off. Not just a single spin. It could easily be a trilogy, just like the Super Nintendo trilogy. We could have a Donkey Kong Country trilogy. You know, I'll grant that in my perfect world, it probably wouldn't be Seth Rogen in the role, but this is the world we live in, so we'll just make the best of it. But yeah, we could bring in the Kremlings, K. Rool. It could be not kind of a ongoing conflict. We could have them attacking the Jungle Kingdom for the first time, kind of bring them into Donkey Kong's first meeting with K. Rool. Maybe he could kidnap... I would say kidnap Diddy Kong, but that would almost seem a little bit like repeating this movie, kidnapping Luigi. He could kidnap Cranky Kong, something like that. So that's an easy first movie there, Donkey Kong versus King K. Rool and the Kremlings. And there's even kind of a character arc that's somewhat informed by Donkey Kong's appearance in this Mario movie, kind of where we see he's kind of a hothead. He's very arrogant, he's punch first, ask questions later kind of the guy. And that's a potential character arc that he could kind of go through, kind of tempering his, it's almost like some of the, it's basically the character arc of Thor in the first Thor movie, right? It's that kind of thing. But then there could easily be sequels to that. Personally, I was never crazy about the villains in the Donkey Kong Country Returns games. I guess the Tikis were okay, but they didn't have enough character, really, to be the main villains of a movie to me. And whatever those snowmen bad guys from Tropical Freeze were, they didn't stand out to me at all. But you know what Donkey Kong universe villain besides K. Rool I actually like is Whiz Pig from Diddy Kong Racing.
Sorry to break the party, worms, but I had to say goodbye.
I believe that's the only game appearance he ever had, but I don't know, he's just always a pretty memorable design and character to me, so yeah, it could be like a, K. Rool Whiz Pig team up for a potential Donkey Kong Country 2 or 3 movie. I might like that. But yeah, in addition to doing a pretty good job setting up the the Kong Kingdom, I thought this movie also did a excellent job throwing Luigi right where we want him into spooky situations, confronting the undead, confronting dry bones. Did he meet any boos in this movie or not? I don't think I remember, but yeah, we threw him right where we like Luigi, being scared and running and whimpering at horror situations. So it seems like they've done a great job setting up a potential Luigi's Mansion spin-off. Now, I don't know if they would spin it directly off of this one, or if they would do Mario movie 2 first and then do like a Luigi's Mansion movie. But it would be a perfect like October release, like a late mid-October Halloween season release. Luigi's Mansion, it would be perfect. Having kind of incorporating a sort of a light, very kid-friendly, of course, kind of horror element, like a haunted house movie for kids. With King Boo as kind of our villain. Introduce what's Professor Egad, is that his name? I admit I'm not the biggest Luigi's Mansion expert, I'll admit. I played the first one 20-something years ago and never played Dark Moon or Luigi's Mansion 3, so I'm not an expert at the whole thing, but I do can clearly look at it and see they did such a good job setting up those fears for Luigi here. So there's tons of easy sequel potential there, or spin-off potential, I should say. Now, sequel potential, what we call a Mario movie 2. I don't know if it would, if Luigi spun off into his own thing, maybe Luigi would only make actually a small cameo in the sequel, so maybe it wouldn't even be called a Super Mario Bros. Movie 2, maybe it would just be called Super Mario Movie 2. But anyway, in discussing that, let's start with let's work backwards. Let's start with the absolute least likely stuff that happens, stuff that I see no real potential of it actually happening outside of my feverful imagination, and work to stuff that I think might actually happen in it. So, I don't think this is going to happen. This movie didn't acknowledge the RPGs in any way, shape, or form that I'm aware of, so I don't think this would ever happen. But I would love if the Mario movies escalated from Bowser as the villain to a slightly more serious villain, like I said. And so I would love to see someone like the Shadow Queen from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, or the Smithy Gang from Super Mario RPGs as like greater villains above Bowser. But as I just said, I would be gobsmacked beyond what you can possibly believe if they in any way, shape, or form considered that. I don't see any possibility of that happening. Now, we did see some Shy Guys in this movie, so maybe slightly less impossible than that would be if they somehow worked in a Wart and Subcon as villains. Probably unlikely, because as far as I'm aware, Wart has never been in anything except Mario Bros. 2 and Mario Bros. 2 re-releases, so also probably unlikely, even if we did get a little bit of taste of Mario 2 with seeing some Shy Guys in this movie. So getting those not very likely scenarios out of the way, what I think could actually happen in the sequel, this wouldn't surprise me so much, is that they brought in Bowser Jr. to possibly break Bowser out of prison. Honestly, it wouldn't be my preference for Bowser to be the main villain again, just because, one, he's such a comedic figure and there's less threat there, but two, because generally I don't like when sequels have the same villain quite so much. It stems from my kind of a childhood watching James Bond movies, I guess, where they would always have basically a new set of villains every time out, generally. So I would love it if there was different villains, but if I'm being honest, probably it'll be Bowser again in Mario Movie 2, but they could do some twists on it by bringing in Bowser Jr. to break Bowser out. Now, here's what will be interesting. What if they maybe even pulled kind of loose, didn't go to Isle Delfino like Mario Sunshine, but pulled in some loose kind of elements from the Mario Sunshine story of possibly having Bowser Jr. disguise himself as Shadow Mario and frame Mario for stuff. So Mario like goes to prison and has like a court thing like in Mario Sunshine.
The guilty party sits among us. It is none other than Mario.
Objection! Overruled.
While Bowser Jr., aka Shadow Mario, breaks Bowser out. That could be an interesting direction to go. And then of course there's Wario and Waluigi. And it's interesting, they're kind of more like scoundrels or almost anti-heroes usually, but Wario did start as a villain in 6 Golden Coins, so could we have Wario as, if not the lead villain in the movie, at least a supporting villain? But yeah, those things I just said, Bowser Jr., Wario, those are, I have to admit, a lot more likely than getting the Shadow Queen or the Smithy Gang, however happy the latter would make me. Oh, and also I shouldn't forget Peach's past. We definitely set up something there. I noted they pointed in that scene with the meadow of fire flowers where Peach is telling Mario about her backstory. We get a very pointed reference when she kind of like gestures out of the sky. Just says, there's a lot of galaxies out there. And the use of that word didn't feel accidental there. It felt like a specifically chosen word in the script that's possibly setting up, that could even not be setting up part 2. That could be setting up a potential Mario movie 3, hopefully not too many years down the line, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, we could easily bring in Rosalina and the Comet Observatory. Maybe we could reveal that the Power Star is, that the large part of Bowser's plot in this movie centered around was one of many Power Stars, you know, throughout the galaxies, and could build up to a greater galactic scale threat, whether from Bowser or some different villain. But yeah, that could easily be a setup for Peach's backstory being a major part of a future movie, plus Rosalina and so on. So what other observations do I have to make about the movie before I move on? The Luma Lee, the blue Luma, did steal the show, I felt like, in the Luigi in jail scenes. The suicidal / nihilistic Luma with its gleefully chirped depressing observations about the state of the world and prison songs, and even at the end lamenting the empty theater, the empty void. That was a definite show stealer, one of the funnier things in the movie. The Peaches song, quite funny, but I admit I found the Luma even funnier. I can't think of too much else to observe about the movie, really. I think I pretty much said it all, but yeah, like I said, so overall my review of the movie, removing myself from the kind of context of like a huge Mario fan going back my whole life, it's not like I don't understand where some of the critics who gave it negative reviews come from. If you aren't like a Mario fan, I can see looking at this and seeing kind of a simple kids movie, but I just think it did what it needed to do in establishing both the lore and the world of Mario itself for this movie, but also kind of putting its foot down and saying, like, this is a future direction for Nintendo movies. I think all video game movies should really take a lesson from this. I think whatever they adapt next, goddamn, I don't know, make a Shadow of the Colossus movie and make it very accurate to the games. If I don't know anything about the Grand Theft Auto games, or if they make a Grand Theft Auto movie, just take the actual characters from the game. If they make a Red Dead movie, take the characters and scenarios straight from the game. If they make a goddamn Adventures of Lolo movie, they should be playing that annoying song from the NES game straight through the whole movie, right? Just these video game movies, I think, should strive to be accurate where they can, filling in things like character where they need to. But I think, yeah, the success of this, I think, is so good, regardless of any complaints I might have about the writing, because it sets up a new way for video game movies to be, in terms of just accurately represent the world. You don't have to reimagine things. Just take the world, put it on the screen. I think I already said that a few times, but it can't be reiterated enough that this movie's success is a win for gamers, simply in that it shows that is just the way to go. I was going to say it's a way to go. I just think it's the way to go. I think every video game turned movie should strive for the highest level of fidelity possible in terms of visual and lore and musical presentation. So now that I've said my piece about the Super Mario Bros. Movie, let's kind of glimpse through a few of the comments on the last video I posted about where I kind of expressed that I don't really personally like the idea of this immediately building up to a Nintendo or a Smash Bros. Cinematic universe of sorts, but let's see what people have to say. So this was an interesting comment from a Banjo that I actually, as a recording this, just got pretty recently. It said, "I don't think they will have to be constant with which studios make their movies, or which medium, or which rating each movie has to have to make a cinematic universe. Metroid can have a live-action film, and when it's time to make a Smash movie, which is what I suggested, a live-action Metroid, they can just put Samus there, make her animated, same continuity even. Spider-Verse is taking video games, live-action Spider-Man, making them part of the same universe, just animated, so that can happen. There's no reason not to make an animated version of Detective Pikachu for the Nintendo Cinematic Universe, for example." And yeah, that's something I commented, something similar to that. I said maybe they could have a more serious, like, I proposed a live-action Zelda movie. Some people in the comments disagreed, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I proposed a more serious, kind of a Zelda with more of a tone akin to Lord of the Rings. And I said maybe a more comedic animated Link could also be involved in a Smash Bros. Universe. I don't know about same continuity. I'd find it a little weird personally if we had Link engaged in kind of this war against, Ganon, maybe even Calamity Ganon, leveling the land of Hyrule, like a very serious fantasy conflict of like good and evil. and suddenly he's like bickering with Mario about, well, Bowser does like a soft shoe routine or something like that. I don't know, but I do see what you mean though, that I don't know about same continuity, but I agree there's no reason we couldn't have Metroid live action and then also an animated Samus in like a crossover, similar to how, like you said, the Spider-Verse movies could do it. So that's a possibility. Wizo is never a pro says, we literally have a warp zone in the Mario movie, the pipe that leads to the Mushroom Kingdom, which could lead to crossovers that make sense. Yeah, that's true, but it's not so much the possibility of there being a crossover. Like, I understand these are kind of fantasy sci-fi universes, so anything could happen, but it's the Jurassic Park saying of, just because they could doesn't mean you should, right? Because it's not so much that I deny that it could happen, it's that I feel like the tone of a Metroid movie done properly would clash so much with this movie that putting them together would just feel very awkward to me. That's kind of more my argument. And Thad Master says, just because these games vary in tone doesn't mean a Smash Bros. Movie can't work. That could be possible. I was about to think of other crossovers there's really been besides Marvel. It's really all I can think of. But I guess, like, I don't know, Black Panther and Guardians of the Galaxy have very different tones, but they were both in the last two Avengers movies. So, you know, it could work. Watermelone64 says, I don't see a downside to making a Smash Bros. Movie. Like, dude, it's a hypothetical epic crossover film featuring heroes from the most beloved video games ever. Why wouldn't anyone who is a fan of the game's crossover not want that? Big logical fallacy to turn that idea down. And yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of the, I guess this is just a fundamental disagreement with the premise of my last video, because I kind of do see a downside, because my argument was that I feel like it kind of, if everything is kind of targeting, funneling towards one big crossover, I feel like that almost locks everything into being sort of tonally similar. Like, this comedic tone worked very well for this Mario movie and would work well for Luigi's Mansion, Donkey Kong Country, maybe even other universe stuff like Kirby, but I just feel like having a Metroid movie feel anything like this whatsoever would just, it would not be what I want from a Metroid movie. I'll just put it that way. Mike Tube says, I agree a big Smash Bros. Movie shouldn't happen, but I also really like to see movie adaptations of Zelda, Metroid, Splatoon, and other IPs catering to numerous different audiences. Illumination would do the PG comedy adventure stuff like Splatoon or Kirby, or maybe studios like DreamWorks or Sony Pictures could work on stuff like Zelda or Metroid. Yeah, that's basically more or less my contention, except, I feel like Metroid even, I would have it not be animated at all. I would do a live action one, but yeah, it seems like this person is mostly on the same page as me. Main Gamer says, I haven't seen the Mario movie yet myself, so likewise can't comment either. I have seen it now, so I got one up on you, Main Gamer. However, from a stylistic perspective, I agree. The problem is that it's made a shit ton of money and fans want it to happen. True. But I guess anything that happens from this point will happen pretty slowly, I think. My future honest prediction for now would be probably by the end of this year we will hear at least a sequel, if not even a sequel and direct spin-offs like Donkey Kong Country announced. But to be honest, these movies do take a pretty good while to make. Like, I believe, wasn't this announced in 2018 or 2019 or something like that? And maybe they announced it a little too early. Maybe we don't know. Maybe there's already been scripts written. Maybe things are farther along than we think or know. But yeah, it could. I could also potentially see a scenario when the second movie in this Nintendo movie project is like, 2026. Even like 2027, to be honest. Now, maybe they would start making a bunch at once. So then after that, we would start getting one a year, or maybe even two a year. I would hope they don't overextend themselves too much, like a lot of the superhero stuff is done these days. But I do feel like, unless things are farther away than we think, like even what would be probably the next non-Mario universe thing, a potential Zelda movie, even that, like, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if it's like 2028 or something, which, trust me, I don't like saying it. I feel regretful even those words pass my mouth, but that is possible. So we probably won't know anything too quickly. But yeah, so 2028, at my age, approaching middle age, those 4 and 5 year gaps don't feel quite as long. But I mean, if you're like 6 years old or something and watching that, that's most of your lifetime. So hopefully things are farther along than we think, and it could be just a couple of years till we get the next one. But honestly, I'd be pretty surprised. But let's see. Rachel DeMetal says, Super Smash Bros. Woohoo! Nice. Zoom Deepie says, You mean Nintendo Cinematic Universe. And although Chris Pratt Mario voice was his real voice, the box office is $500 million and rising. So we could see more Nintendo Illumination spin-off films. And yeah, I would definitely assume Illumination would handle, at the very least, everything in the Mario universe, such as Luigi's Mansion, Donkey Kong Country. Would they also handle things beyond that, like Splatoon and Kirby I gave as examples in my last video, or maybe Animal Crossing? Those I could see fitting the Illumination style very well. Other stuff, even quasi-serious stuff like Star Fox, I'd be a little more iffy on. I'd rather see like DreamWorks handle some of that. And then once you get into kind of like Zelda and Metroid, I don't think Illumination would be particularly proper at all. Hugo Master says, live action would be a nightmare. Think of live action today. We can't have costumes that are faithful to the source material. While a Goron in heavy practical makeup and a bodysuit would be great, it would just be a nightmare to get right, not to mention the cost. Yeah, you could CGI them, but CGI is a crutch these days and takes me out of whatever I'm watching because it's obvious the dude in a blue screen room. I could see live action for TV, but not film. Nintendo would likely have DreamWorks animate it. I assume the It he's talking about is a hypothetical Zelda movie, and have the world and characters look close to the source material. As for the tone, the shareholders of Nintendo are not going to make the dark Twilight Majora film everyone is hoping for. Sorry, there'll be saturation and vibrancy, but still moody when it needs to, but certainly not the whole film. At the end of the day, it's whatever Nintendo thinks gets the butts and seats in the theater, and that's kids. You will be better, it'll be animated and colorful like Breath of the Wild. But you can bet the casual audience will want a Smash Bros. Universe, and Nintendo will brush diehards aside in favor of majority casual moviegoers who only know the MCU formula. Don't get me wrong, an independent film for each IP with different art styles would be amazing, but Nintendo would never take the expensive risk of having different directors and studios go wild with their IPs. Well, you could be right. I do think it's a little funny that the idea is Breath of the Wild would be the colorful one, because I think of Breath of the Wild personally as the post-apocalyptic one. That would be almost the bleakest and darkest Zelda they could go for, right? I don't want anything too like, I never even thought they'd do like Majora's Mask. Certainly not for a first one, but like Ocarina of Time, it's just dark enough. Like, it has certain scary moments involving, Ganondorf and the Bongo Bongo. Maybe they would rename Bongo Bongo. But yeah, it's for me, something like that would be just kind of the perfect level, where it's at the level of darkness of like the 1988 the film Willow, something like that. Not even as dark as like Lord of the Rings, but kind of like a bit more austere in tone. It's kind of how I pictured it. Thunder Guy says, please give us a Smash Bros. Universe. This guy doesn't know the first thing what he's talking about. Whew. You got my number. Crow Game says, I slightly disagree. The franchise can stand on their own if they had movies, but I think of them how being connected would be very fun and make them stand out even more if they knew how to adapt the characters. But then again, this is a what-if scenario, so only time will tell. That's true. I said I think it might be quite a bit of time before we really know for sure. Trouble the Cat says, live-action Zelda wouldn't work for the same reason Twilight Princess trying to look more realistic and gritty didn't work. Have you actually seen the character designs for the side characters in most Zelda games? Also, fuck live-action in general. Link deserves better. I don't know, I don't quite feel the same way. For me, I really like seeing a fantasy universe kind of rendered in live action. Like, I think even if it was very well, even if it had the same script as the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy, and generally the same, Howard Shore music, the same visual design. If it was the exact same but animated even very well, it wouldn't just be quite the same to me. It wouldn't be quite as memorable. I love seeing a fantasy universe done in live action well. I love seeing the Game of Thrones universe. Complaints about how that show went aside. I loved seeing it. Lord of the Rings universe, even the Dungeons and Dragons in the new film that just came out a couple weeks ago. So I don't know, I enjoy live action fantasy, and that's not me throwing animated film under the bus. I'm someone who owned the complete Studio Ghibli catalog on DVD even before it hit HBO Max the other year, right? So obviously I'm pro animated films as a concept, but I don't know, I like live action fantasy, I always have. Joker Cyniclist says, I fully agree, keep them in their own stories, no Avengers crap crossovers. And that is basically what I said. And Disinferno said basically the same thing. I think Smash Bros. Movie is kind of a bad idea. These characters should be on their own without crossovers to ruin their character arcs. And yeah, that's exactly what I think. Samus has so much going on and dealing with, her past with the Chozo, her growing strange relationship with the Metroids, particularly after knowing the baby, dealing with avenging Ridley, just her various dynamics, especially once they kind of bulk up her character arc for the movie. There's tons going on there, and I think having her, step aside for an adventure to, team up with Little Mac and Mewtwo to fight Galeem, kind of like undermines that for me. King Ant Vibe says, I honestly love the idea and hope it will happen. I think you taking it too seriously. It's a fun idea and a great thing to happen. I would love to see Zelda on the big screen. Well, I agree with the latter part of that comment. Somewhat less so with the former half. Noah Popejoy says, a Zelda movie in the style of How to Train Your Dragon, in my opinion, would be incredible. Or maybe a Studio Ghibli-inspired Zelda film. I think a live-action Zelda film could work fine, but I see Zelda as more an adult animated film with darker tones, which is why Illumination, in my opinion, is the worst studio to adapt Zelda. And yeah, I wouldn't want to see a Zelda with like a Minions type of a sense of humor. That wouldn't work at all. But kind of an anime type one, done kind of in the style of like a Princess Mononoke or a Castle in the Sky or a Nausicaa, that could potentially be interesting. Like I just mentioned, talking about that previous comment, I personally do love the idea of like a live action Zelda, provided they could get the right actor for Link, but I'm sure they could. It probably wouldn't be anyone famous. I was thinking like I was like, what, Austin Butler? And then I was like, no, isn't he like 30 something? You'd probably want someone who's no older than 20, since Link is supposed to be like 17. Yeah, I personally would, I picture like a colorful sort of live action, not like something grim, not like I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, nothing that looks like that visually, but yeah, I would love to see like the Lost Woods and Hyrule Field and the Hylian Castle, Death Mountain and stuff. Obviously, you can see that I'm, my boomer take, all my thoughts kind of gravitate towards the Ocarina of Time. That's kind of like the signature story of the Zelda universe to me, but I would love to see that kind of thing rendered live action, but like a feature length, like a really high quality anime type thing could also work. But yeah, it's like nothing 2D really comes out in theaters anymore. Everything's 3D, so it probably would be more like a DreamWorks type thing, but yeah, maybe they could do a good job. Joshua Webb says, joke's on you. The way I understand it, they are most certainly planning a cinematic universe and people are excited about it. And, well, you must have some inside sources, because I don't think they've said a word about future plans yet, unless you know something I don't. But I believe nothing's been announced and probably won't be for some time. Like I said, maybe by the end of the year we'll know something. But even then, I doubt they would just come right out and announce, here's our plans for Zelda, Mario, Kirby, Star Fox, Splatoon, etc. But, if they did, I would certainly be excited to hear it. Taco Lex says, L take. Nintendo would be stupid if they didn't at least consider the idea of a Smash movie, even with the original 8. Yeah, and I don't know, I just feel like bringing in Pokemon, like Pikachu, you mentioned the original 8, that almost adds another wrinkle to it. Like someone above said, would they just bring in Pikachu from the Detective Pikachu movie, just an animated version, or would we, because I feel like it really wouldn't work if we just went right into Smash Bros., without even setting anything up. You just had like a couple Mario movies, then suddenly we're in Smash Bros with Link and Samus and Fox. So if they did that, we'd have to get a Zelda movie, at least one, Metroid, Kirby, Star Fox, possibly another Pokemon animated universe. Who else is in the original 8? I guess just Yoshi and Donkey Kong. But yeah, I don't know, it's possibility, but they'd need quite a few movies to set that up, wouldn't they? And I Hit the Water says, I like the idea of the Zelda movie, but I don't know if they would base it on a particular game. If they do Ocarina, the optimal choice, but the Mario movie was just based on the core idea of Mario, but I guess Ocarina does encapsulate the entirety of Zelda pretty well. Maybe the cartoon Zelda would feature a Toon Link. And I responded and said, I know what you mean. I feel like a Zelda movie would probably be a bit of a grab bag of ideas from across the series, but I feel like Ocarina would form the strongest core of ideas the grab bag should come from, and that Breath of the Wild, while a great game, should not have much influence at all in a debut Zelda movie because it's such a different beast with its lonely atmosphere, desolate world, and so on. So I'd be okay with 2 separate Zelda series, one animated and more lighthearted, one live action and more serious like Lord of the Rings. But I don't know how mainstream audiences will feel about that. And Vova Svetlov says, I think they make a completely new and different Zelda, which isn't based on any game, but has some of the elements. And I Hit the Water bit said basically the same thing. I think so too, but a lot of the elements will come from Ocarina since it has the most classic story, except the time shift. So yeah, quite a few comments disagreeing with me and some agreeing with me, but I don't know, I feel like it's the post-Marvel effect in our cultural discourse, or maybe I should specifically say the post-Avengers effect. It's been both a boon and a detriment to discourse in various ways. I feel like fewer people, especially like, online geeks such as ourselves, passively consume media these days. Like, people are kind of more naturally curious. They spend a lot more time wondering about the future of series, asking questions, And in some ways that's led to great things. I feel like a lot of serialized television as like a whole kind of grows from that. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship. As TV became more serialized, people got more into it, going back to the late 90s days when Buffy started doing season-long villain arcs, and that's come to today where even like a film series, people are just looking ahead and wondering how can this spin off, how can this cross over, how can we explore this universe, as soon as we see one movie. But in a way, I almost feel like it's detrimental because it's kind of causing people to think too far ahead. Like, it just seems a little bit silly to me that we got this one relatively solid and relatively successful, well, I should say actually very successful and relatively solidly written Mario movie with, no official confirmation that even Zelda or Metroid or anything else is in the works at all. Although I presume conversations are happening, but, people's thoughts go immediately to like, how can we have Link and Marth and Little Mac and Rob the Robot and then the Inklings or whatever the Splatoon people are called and Kid Icarus all teaming up to fight Taboo or Galeem or the Master Hand. Or it just seems to me like even putting aside the if this should happen at all, which as I discussed in my last video I question, but it's like it seems like we're just skipping like a million steps to get there. But, personally, I don't know, maybe this means this video gets downvoted too, but that's okay with me. I still stand by that it's not the way I'd prefer it to go. Like, so watching this movie, the Super Mario Bros. Movie that is, really confirms that this is very much an action comedy, or maybe even like a comedy action. Like, this is a movie that a great deal of thought was obviously put into making it a comedy, a sitcom, And that's not really the tone that I want to bleed at all into like Zelda or Metroid. And I just personally, I'm not really interested in seeing Link or Samus take on, Master Hand or whatever, right? Like, I want to see Link saving Hyrule and taking on Ganon, Aghanim, maybe even Demise. Maybe we could even go back in time and meet Demise. Samus dealing with Mother Brain, Ridley, maybe even Ravenbeak if we want to get into the brand new lore that we just got the other year in Metroid Dread. Yeah, that's kind of the stuff I'd be interested in. Just them kind of being derailed off into teaming up with Mario and Pikachu and like comedy adventures. I don't know. It just doesn't really grab me. It's works so well in video game form because it's exciting to be playing these characters together, but tonally it just seems like weird to me. It seems like, talking about how like a Jon Snow should meet the minions or something like that. I'm just like, I guess it could happen. It's just a little weird, isn't it? But I don't know. But either way, whether they do it or not, which, maybe they will. Apparently one commenter here had some inside info I don't, so maybe I'm wrong, but maybe this is where things are going. Either way, just kind of immediately jumping to that before we even have word of like a single Zelda movie or a single Metroid movie being made. I don't know, it seems like to me like kind of trying to start building a skyscraper with a top floor, like let's get there. Let's start by building a foundation here first. But like I said, I wouldn't hold our breath for that foundation. I feel like it's probably going to take a while. I feel like the best case scenario, honestly, would be like if maybe the next movie is further along than we think, like a Mario movie 2 at least, and maybe it could come out like 3 years from now. And maybe since this is so successful, they can immediately start getting a lot of screenwriters and producers working, and maybe we could start doing like a steady march of Nintendo movies after that, like maybe like one a year. But yeah, I don't feel like it's gonna happen right away. Or, maybe they can just do the ultimate plot twist, right? And just go, just shock everyone by just going obscure as hell, like Zelda, Metroid, Donkey Kong movies. No, we're gonna do the Pilot Wings movie first, right? We're gonna do the Adventures of Lolo movie. Let's get the Mike Jones needs to come back to the Nintendo universe. Let's get the Star Tropics movie going, the Wave Race movie, the Drill Dozer movie. That would be the true shocking plot twist that I would enjoy. But anyway, that's enough chatter for now, but I won't cover all the Nintendo movie news as it comes along and go to an actual movie news channel for that. But once more concrete things come out, even if it's several years from now when we get the next movie, I'm sure I will eventually be talking about that stuff on this channel again. Talk to you all soon.